And I'm going to call this meeting to order. For the special open workshop for the Village Energy Task Force, Friday, October 18th, Laguna Woods Village Community Center Boardroom. And I'm going to ask everybody to put their cell phones on mute, turn them off, put them outside the door, do something with them, please. Because I don't want to hear any cell phones go off during the meeting. It's not really polite. And then I'm, at this particular point in time, I'm the vice chair of this committee, and I'm chairing this particular meeting. And so get used to seeing me here in this seat, because it won't be for long. So in any case, I want to see whether or not we have any media in here. Anybody here from the newspaper or from a TV station or?
Well, the TV's on here.
Other than the TV, we're on the air here where it'll be done in YouTube. This is not live. This will be a taped event. Nobody else here from the media? Okay. No media here? Okay. So the agenda is we're going to approve the agenda, but basically it's just a special open workshop task force to go over TEC's work that they did so far on the particular reviews that they've done of our infrastructure within Laguna Woods Village. This will be addressing both, all three of the units, GRF, United, and Third. So from that perspective, that's what the agenda is. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren?
That's correct.
So anybody?
I move that we...
Can I have a second, please?
I second that.
Okay. Any objections? Without objections, we'll go forward with there. Chairman's remarks. I don't have any remarks other than the fact, as I told you before, I'm the vice chair, and I will be here for this particular meeting. Any member comments, items not on the agenda, and basically right now, the items that are not on the agenda would be nothing in the task force, the TEC report.
Yes, we have three speakers. The first
Okay.
speaker is Steve Leonard.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on this side of the dais today. I just want to file a formal objection to the fact that I'm not being allowed to chair this meeting today in my official capacity as chair of the Village Energy Task Force. I was recently removed as an advisor from Third Mutual. However, that removal from Third Mutual has nothing to do with my standing in any of the other task forces on which I serve or my position here. So I would request that I be seated, and if someone would like to make that motion, I would accept it. If not, thank you for your time.
The next speaker we have is Judith Chapman.
Mr. Chair, may I speak from the dais?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to remind anyone that was not at the Meet the Candidates this morning, it will be replayed at 6 p.m. today on our very own Channel 6 Village TV. It was worth watching. Please tune in. Thank you.
The next speaker is Jules Allen.
This is going to take more than 3 minutes. I urge you to allow me to make my points.
I'm assuming this has something to do with energy, right?
Pardon me?
I'm assuming this has something to do with energy. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it has to do, I guess, with this meeting. I understand, I just learned that Steve Leonard was removed from his post as chair of this task force. And I'm stating my strong objection to what I understand is the procedure that was utilized in order to do that. GRF's disciplinary rules are completely screwed up. GRF bylaw 451 provides that GRF board may discipline or suspend a member, and
Excuse me, Jules. This is not a GRF issue. This is a third issue. He is a member of Thirds as a advisor, okay? So, I mean, I agree with probably most of what you're going to say there, okay, but we can't bring up GRF into the mix here,
Well,
okay? Because
okay,
it's really
then-
not germane
all
in this
right,
particular
then,
case.
then I strike my comments about GRF. But the point is that in order to discipline someone, we have rules that require due process under certain circumstances. And when someone is removed from all of these boards and committees, particularly for what is considered a violation of a conduct violation, that person is entitled to be heard and have the right to confront his attackers. As a quasi-governmental entity, everything we do, every action the board takes comes weighted down with the United States Constitution and its requirements for due process, which requires equal protections and fairness. The principle is that Californians, for many Californians, and I'm quoting a case now, associations function as a separate municipal government, regulating many aspects of their daily lives. And therefore, one clearly sees the association as a quasi-governmental entity. That's Chantiles versus Lake Forest Masters Homeowners Association.
Okay, Jules, I'm going to have to stop you there. Not because I don't agree with you. I fully agree with everything you said. I don't think the man got due process. That's my personal opinion. However, at this particular point in time, all of that had to be brought before Third because they're the ones that basically gave him this particular sentence, if you will, for lack of a better word. So under the circumstances right now, I will ask for a motion, okay, from this particular committee as to whether or not they would want Steve to be seated at this committee as the chairman. But other than that, anything you're saying, I totally agree with, but unfortunately, it's not germane to this committee or this task force at this particular point in time. Okay?
Actually, I think it is. In the first place,
Well, why is that? Because the letter to him came from Third, and those are the people that made
the
that
letter
particular...
to him was illegal, and it was a classic.
But the
from
thing
what I
right now, this
understand,
is not a court of law here.
It was a classic.
This is not a court of law. This is a task force meeting. We're trying to get these people to do their job.
I understand,
here.
Carl, and let me just explain why.
Point of order.
It's a typical example of what has happened before at Third.
I understand
Where,
that.
for example,
I
Marty
understand.
Point of order.
But the thing right now is,
blackballed.
Jules, I'm going to have to stop you there, okay? This particular point in time, we have people here to do this particular function, to give us the TEC review of what they did so far. That's where we are. At this particular point in time, all I can do is ask for a motion from this committee, from this, task force, don't want to use the word committee because, God forbid, this task force as to whether or not they want to seat Steve in this particular place, and if they want to seat him,
Well, then what I would suggest is that I strongly urge this group to seat him because otherwise they are going along with what I consider to be highly irregular, totally improper, and completely incompetent advice that they have gotten. And this is exactly what happened in the Marty case that some of you will remember, and what happens when one allows that type of advice to
Sir,
take
you've been
over.
asked to, it's
Okay,
a point of
it's
order.
a
You are
point of
not,
order.
you're out of order.
So at this
Please.
particular point in time, okay.
We have two more
I-
speakers, Mr.
and
Chairman.
And I have been advised right now to not even ask for that motion, but the fact that he's here right now and he will be heard, okay, is good enough because as far as I'm concerned, I don't want this chairmanship position. I am the vice chair. I've said this before on more than one occasion. This man over here was gracious enough to accept that particular role, and whatever happened regarding this whole event needs to be reviewed, but at this particular point in time, it's not germane to this meeting right now. Let's
hear
get
what
through
you're
the
saying.
meeting.
I disagree.
agree.
Thank you.
Okay, fine, okay, but at this particular point in time, we are going to be chasing rainbows because this is not the venue that we need to be addressing this, okay? I agree with what you're saying personally. That's my personal opinion, okay? Everything that you said, I agree with, but at this particular point in time, in this particular venue, we're looking at energy task force stuff, and, you know, and that's where we're going to go with this. And I've been advised not to ask for that motion, so I'm not going to ask for the motion, but I will ask Steve to stay where he is and still help us with everything, because I think that some of the things that happened, I'm not in agreement with, and that's enough said on that matter. Yes?
We do have 2 more speakers.
Fine, please.
Richard Rader.
I think that my concern has already been raised by the chairman. It is a third issue, period.
The next speaker is Catherine Freshley.
You know, this is something that's been coming for the last 3 years. There's no such thing as a task force. It's not covered in the GRF bylaws. It's not covered in the law. A committee, and basically this is a committee, and any organization made up of the directors are committees. And the GRF bylaws state that a GRF committee is made up of 3 directors from GRF and 2 directors from each of the housing mutuals. They may have counselors or specialists, but those people are not in a position to take any authority. They're not in a position to vote. And you've got yourselves in a real problem over the last 3 years by not following the governing documents of this community. And until you begin to follow the governing documents, you will continue to have these kinds of situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate it. Anybody else?
We have no more speakers.
Thank you. Okay, with that. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I've done a little research with regard to task forces, and I think it's as important. Then let me read you what, what a task force is. First of all, based upon their experience with task forces, some organizations swear at them and some swear about them, or some swear on them, basically. The difference between success and sorrow is often determined by 2 things: how the team is established and how the members work together. So what is a task force? A task force is a small group, usually 4 to 12 people, that bring together a specific set of skills to accomplish a short-term task, and that may be a project team or a working group, but by whatever name, a task force exists to specific time-limited purposes, usually lasting a few months or perhaps a year or more. Often the members come from different parts of an organization, such as various functional units or divisions, different levels, ranging from line staff to management. Individuals are selected for their expertise, their history in the organization, and their interest in the project. Drawing from the varied pool enhances the project's chances for success because the group's members, 1, bring together different skills and ideas, 2, become the project's advocates within the organization, 3, squelch rumors about the project, and 4, foresee potential hurdles to implementation and build solutions into their recommendations. This does not describe in any way a committee of our organizations in this community. We do not have expertise committees, and this has been the first attempt at creating an expertise committee. In fact, we do have other task forces that do exist and do not fall within, quote, the rules of the existing bylaws. But meanwhile, they are an essential part of the success of our organization if we are to succeed. We need to bring expertise to our problems.
Then change the bylaws.
this particular portion.
I don't think that's, you're out of order, you know.
Let's have a little order, please.
No.
Thank you, Bert. When it got brought up before, this task force right now is a task force, as was mentioned by Bert. It's a task force of expertise. We do not implement anything. We make recommendations, and we do it based on the knowledge that we all carry in this task force. That's all it is. And I agree totally with what Bert said, so under the circumstances, we will continue in this task force venue. And here we are. Yes, Bill?
Yeah, I was just wondering, Catherine referred to the GRF bylaws. I was wondering, the two Third Mutual board members that are sitting here at the dais, what the bylaws say about such a task force. Okay,
I'm not going to respond because I don't think I have the knowledge to answer your question.
okay.
I'm willing
Okay.
to respond, and ours says you need to be a member of the community, of United, to be on any committee or task
Okay,
force.
and so we're going to extrapolate and say that that's probably what Third says, okay?
Yeah. However, at this particular point in time, okay, and we need to get on to the business at hand, okay, but at this particular point in time, let me just say, is that this task force is not governed by any one particular entity. It's governed by all three entities, okay, because we have to report to each of the M and Cs of the entities, okay? So this task force, as far as I'm concerned, has people on it that have the expertise to do the job, and that's what we wanted, and that's it. Yes.
This is a situation which is not necessary to be discussed in this. There is events that took place before today were the reason for the actions that happened. So there are some privacy things that we don't want to talk about right now because it's not resolved. So please let's not continue proliferating any conversation about it. It's better for everybody.
Nobody's asking you to do that.
No, I'm not going to say anything, and
Right.
I'm not trying to, but we are
Right.
talking about this over and over again.
Okay,
So
can-
I think we
I
need
think,
to.
I think this is news to some of us here. I mean, I don't know when this action was taken and when people were informed, but certainly I don't, as an advisor to this task force, I didn't know about it until late last night.
Yeah.
And I don't know when this decision was made and how long it's been percolating. And all of a sudden, we come to this important meeting and we're missing our chair.
It
And
happened yesterday.
It happened yesterday,
But the-
okay?
So
Okay, but the thing right now is, okay, at this particular point in time, okay, he's here. He may not be chairing this meeting, but he's here. He will provide whatever input that he has because he put together all of these questions that he gathered from all of us, and those questions were then sent over to TEC. And as a result of that, we have a number of questions. So let's get on to the business at hand. Bert, does it have something to do with the business at hand?
I would like to suggest that when the presentation is made, that Steve face the presenter, which means that he should sit in one of those chairs over there, so that they are,
I think we're getting into form and function here.
Well,
okay?
I think it's
Let's not throw
important.
the baby out with the bathwater. He's going to be over there.
okay?
I mean, let's go, okay? Now, so let me introduce TEC, the Energy Corporation. How do you guys call yourself? The Energy Coalition. Oh, sorry. Let me first, okay, apologize to you for us basically airing our dirty laundry within this particular meeting where we were trying to get some work done, but at the same time, it was important information to be addressed, okay? Because there are differences of opinion as to what occurred. So in any case, let's get on to the business at hand of the Energy Coalition. You received some questions and comments from Steve, I understood. He sent them to you, and as a result of that, you've possibly incorporated many of them into the presentation. Is that a correct statement?
We've incorporated as many that were feasible. There
Right.
were a lot of very detailed questions.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, of course. Hi, I'm Rebecca Hauser, Director of Energy Services at the Energy Coalition.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate it. You can continue. Thank you.
Okay.
Hold on.
Carl, I have
Bill.
a question for Rebecca.
Yes.
As a matter of form, do you want to be interrupted in your presentation with questions, or do you want to go through your presentation?
Can I answer to that?
Sure.
We have an order that this has been set up in. We're going to go through the presentation for GRF, then we're going to move on to United, and third, lastly, I would respectfully ask that you ask the questions after each presentation. So after GRF is completed, or she's completed the presentation, that you would then ask questions related to GRF scope of work, and then so on and so forth for the next ones.
Right. Okay, so that's the form we're going to be utilizing. Okay, we'll go through GRF, then we'll have questions on GRF, then we go through United and then third and what have you, and then we'll have questions for each one. Hopefully, I know that this meeting is not going to be a 2-hour meeting. It'll probably go on, but let's try to keep it down before we get it, so we can get it here by 5 o'clock, I hope.
No, earlier.
Or earlier. So, thank you. Again, I apologize for all the disturbance and stuff, but please start. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time today. As I mentioned, my name is Rebecca Hauser. The Energy Coalition is a 401(c) nonprofit, and we empower communities to leap into a clean energy future. And along here with me today, we have Rich Williams and Brandon Knight from TRC. They provided the bulk of the analysis and recommendations, as they are the technical expert engineering firm that is supporting this project. And so today I have prepared an agenda, and just to reiterate, so we'll start with task 1 on the scope of work, which was the electrical infrastructure assessment reports. As Guy mentioned, here's the order. We'll start with Golden Rain, and then United in third, and take questions in between each of those reports. And then we'll move into task 2, scope review, in the same order, and the task is open and in progress. Okay, so moving into the task 1 review, I will say that the scope of work was nearly identical across all of the boards. And so you'll notice that similar methodology is used across the reports. And so some of the slides are repeated. Okay, and so before I jump in today, I wanted to define what electrical infrastructure is, and I have this diagram here just to help everyone understand what we looked at and what was embedded in this first task. And so the transformer, pictured here in the gray box, is in a static oil-filled device which transforms voltage level. It either increases it or decreases it to keep power and frequency constant. And when Tech and TRC came on board as the energy consultant, we heard numerous concerns voiced several times about the aging infrastructure and SCE transformer failures. Transformers can fail for a number of reasons, including end of life, manufacturing flaws, and electrical overloads. The next item here on the diagram is the electrical meter. Many of us are probably more familiar with this one. It measures electric energy that's consumed. Next is the switchgear. The electrical switchgear is made up of various pieces of electrical equipment used to distribute power to individual electrical loads, and it provides protection when electrical incidents occur. The switchgear is a general term and is comprised of an electrical panel or assembly of panels on which are mounted switches, fuses, instruments, and other electrical equipment used to serve the electrical load. Overloads can cause outages. Next is the sub-panel, which is a separate, smaller electrical panel that is fed from a larger piece of switchgear and serves the electrical loads. Lastly is the circuit, a path between two or more points along with which electrical current is carried. Circuits can become overloaded and burn up. So moving on into the review of the electrical infrastructure assessments and starting in with Golden Rain Foundation, let's dive in. And I have a slide here. Before we review the specifics of the reports, I wanted to just take a moment and review high level what was embedded in task 1. The task was to perform an assessment of the community's current electrical infrastructure with the deliverable as the electrical infrastructure assessment report. As indicated in the scope of work, our approach was to perform a review of the community's electrical systems and infrastructure for the current state. Our objective was to identify deficiencies and upgrades required to accommodate the existing load. With this objective in mind, we looked to address the following questions in terms of immediate actions. What does GRF need to address now to avoid outages and damage to electrical infrastructure equipment? And secondly, in terms of long-term action, what should GRF focus on to ensure the electrical equipment continues to operate properly? And what loads can be added? This scope also included identifying potential sites for a microgrid. So moving on to the first step in our methodology, we collected data to identify potential issues. Information was collected from VMS staff. Chris Naylor, who just stepped out, has been a huge help in that. We reviewed any previous energy studies, information on site drawings and electrical plans. And we also requested SCE utility data to establish baseline and demand consumption. I just want to take a moment and pause here and note that SCE was not clear on what they could and could not provide to us to develop these reports for many months. And there was a lot of back and forth with SCE's various departments and changing staff. And eventually, conversations with SCE came to a head in June of this year, and SCE confirmed that they could not share some of the specific data that was requested. And while we were not able to confirm some of the findings that we found in the field with SCE data, for GRF, we were able to identify and locate all of the transformers for which we requested SCE data on. We were able to find them all in the field except for one. And GRF is actually unique in that the load on the transformers came from the site in which the transformer was located. And it's a little different situation and scenario for Third and United, and I'll touch on those later. However, one good thing that did come out of the meeting with SCE was that SCE shared they would be responsible for pay for transformer upgrades. And so that was a really key piece of information that came out of that meeting. So next in the methodology were the site visits, and the intent of the field inspections was to assess the condition of the major facilities in Golden Rain Foundation. TRC engineers and tech staff performed field visits to evaluate all 7 clubhouses, a representative gatehouse, which happened to be gatehouse number 2, and we also looked at the library and collected information about the electrical facilities and their condition. I'll mention not all sites were included in the scope of the field inspections. They were chosen based on size and representative samples. And the site dates are listed in the reports, and we visited the sites across numerous dates. And so after inspecting the electrical equipment, TRC rated the condition of the electrical equipment based on the asset condition evaluation criteria that is pictured here. I apologize for the small print, but these are in the reports, and so you can hopefully get a better picture of the image there. And so these criteria were used to rate the electrical equipment at each of the locations that were fielded. And when I say fielded, that means site visited by TRC and tech staff. And so when we say something is excellent or poor condition in the report, we had a methodology that we used, and that's this criteria here. So the 4 criteria we looked at were asset age, asset condition, asset performance, and the level of maintenance. And Appendix B in the report shows a summary of how the inspected assets were rated. And they're elaborated on throughout the report. And so let's jump into the findings. First, I'd just like to make a note that VMS is doing a great job in maintaining the electrical infrastructure that is decades old, as evidenced by the rare failure of components and minimal electrical downtime. Here's a screenshot on the right-hand side from the appendix in the report showing the inspected gear and the asset condition rating. And so in summary, many of the assets that we inspected are in good condition. The condition of the assets did range from poor to excellent. SCE transformers are adequately sized to serve the current load. We found that there's a robust emergency generator maintenance program in place. And again, there's a full summary of the assets inspected in Appendix B. And so now let me touch on some of the key findings. And while in general the assets are in good condition, on this slide we're identifying the key problem areas that should be a focus on for improvements. And in a subsequent slide, I'll elaborate on what short-term and long-term recommendations we have to address these findings. And so in Clubhouse 1, the switchgear in the main panel electrical room is severely corroded due to its proximity to pool equipment. Secondly, outages are caused by low voltage when the HVAC system cycles. We found at Clubhouse 6, the electrical panels were of older vintage and in poor condition. They were corroded and in need of repair or replacement. The corroded equipment presents a hazard, and the cause of corrosion should be identified and eliminated in, we recommend, 1 year's time. And so the next step in our methodology was to develop the assessment report. And in the report, we, oh no, there's an issue with the text on this. Oh, there we go. Okay. And so here are some of the recommendations and estimated budget costs. So at Clubhouses 1 and 6, as I mentioned, we recommend to ID and eliminate the cause of corrosion on the electrical equipment. The pool equipment in the electrical room in Clubhouse 1, those issues have been known for some time, and the assessment confirmed those issues. We recommend the equipment is separated and rusted equipment is replaced. We recommend prioritizing these issues as something that should be remedied to prevent any equipment failures and minimize the hazard exposure to employees. A load study should be performed at the kitchen and office areas, which should be conducted by a qualified California professional engineer. And this, I just want to mention, this wasn't included in the scope for Task 1. Moving on to the estimated budget costs, I will say the costs are estimated based on typical equipment and labor costs to repair and replace the equipment. Each case will need a detailed design to solicit bid prices. The total estimated cost for these short-term recommendations is $180,000 to $200,000. I have a little asterisk there noting that we added on an additional $20K for upgrades to sites not inspected, such as the other gatehouses. So, in terms of next steps, we already leveraged the findings to initiate the Task 2 assignment, which was to explore the feasibility of a microgrid and alternative energy systems. Our presentation was delivered to GRF on July 3rd, and we were advised to hold off on additional Task 2 initiatives shortly thereafter. And I have a slide later on in the presentation about Task 2. So I will pause there and open up the floor for any questions.
I noticed, houses, but there's a facility we have that's a sizable facility. Namely, I'm talking about the Village Greens. Why did you bypass the Village Greens?
Yeah, so we could not inspect every single site for every single board within the scope, and we chose to select a representative sample. I understand the Village Green is not quite as representative. And additionally, the scope for Task 1 for GRF was partly looking towards sites where we could incorporate a microgrid, and so that was part of that selection.
Were you aware when you did this study of the pending installation of the EV chargers at this clubhouse, at this building?
At the Village Greens?
No, here.
Oh, yes. Yes, we were aware.
And you took that into account?
Yes.
Okay. Were you also, did you get to see the initial report on Clubhouse 1 by the consultant that we had hired? Because the study was being done on Clubhouse 1. And what we now do with the electrical equipment, okay, also has to work in with what we're proposing ultimately to decide to do with Clubhouse 1. So if we decide that we're going to do a revision or renovation, which may take 2 or 3 years, what would you say when you're claiming that we should be replacing this within a year? What recommendation would there be?
Well, it depends on the timing of the renovations. If the building's going to be demolished, then maybe it's not necessary sooner. But if the building's going to persist for 2 or 3 years, we recommend that the equipment is replaced sooner.
So in other words, we'd have to spend $150,000 and then tear the building down in 3 years. Okay.
No, the total cost estimates are not solely for Clubhouse 1. That was across the facilities that we inspected.
The other, Mr. Chair, what I did, and I don't have the questions here with me because I left them home, I thought that Steve would be asking them. But I did provide Steve with a list of questions.
Those questions were supposedly incorporated. Those questions were then sent to Rebecca, and
yeah, and we've provided, we developed written responses to all of the questions, and I think those can be sent around later, for anything that might be too nuanced to be addressing during this presentation.
Pardon me if I may, we can pass the question answers to the task force right now. We do have those.
okay, why don't we do that?
On that same subject, Guy, we were given a number for Clubhouse 1 revisions for the consultant. We've hired a consultant to look at Clubhouse 1. Does any of this information, is any of this information been given to that consultant?
No, they did an independent study assessment, and they, we have a draft form of that that is still under review. But they did assess all the components within the clubhouse, and they will be providing recommendations and costs.
But they didn't have this information.
No, because they started their study well before this study.
Exactly. That was my point.
Yes, Bill?
Yeah, when I read the report on GRF, the thing that jumped out at me, being I guess you'd call it novice in this case, but I've got a pool over there that's got a lot of water in it, and I've got a lot of old people that get into that pool on a daily basis. And when somebody starts telling me that the infrastructure is corroding and going away and it's electric, and I think of water and electricity, I get pretty concerned. So I don't know, I didn't walk over and look at the building, but I don't know how critical it is that equipment be repaired like yesterday. I mean, somebody's got to, if there's a real problem there and it's potentially dangerous, I think it needs to be addressed right now.
I would agree. We had our staff, one which is a licensed C10 electric contractor. They went over there with our other staff and they inspected. There is no immediate danger for safety reasons. There is signs of corrosion on the exterior of these components, and they will be addressed.
Well, the reason why I think Bill makes mention of this is because the preliminary report that we received, okay, the words immediate were utilized, okay? And those words immediate from our consultants indicate to us that they have the expertise to indicate it was immediate. So what we're doing is we're going over and countering their immediate.
Well, I can't answer to what their definition
I don't know what
of
immediate was.
is, but
They're going to have to give us an answer right now.
A couple minutes ago, I mentioned that we recommend it's addressed in 1 year's time, and that's how we were defining immediate.
Okay, well, the thing right now is, okay, immediate to me with regard to 1 year is very subjective, okay? 1 year, 9 months, 11, I mean, it's not specific, okay? To me, immediate says you better do it now because otherwise somebody's going to get hurt. So when you're saying immediate now means annual, okay, or in a year's time period, that's very subjective, and it's not objective at all. So under the circumstances right now, we're saying right now that we do not have a situation where it needs to take care of today for the safety of our community and the safety of our people. Is that what we're saying?
that's what we're saying.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. I was just looking at the answer to the question regarding when were these areas inspected. And the reason I asked that question, I was interested, and this had to do with Clubhouse 1. If you're saying that, this is something that is dangerous, something that has to be dealt with, if you knew that back on your first inspection, did you notify
Yes.
VMS?
Yes.
You did?
The staff that we were with, we let them know.
Okay, so this was done then on December of 2018.
I'm not sure on the exact, so we looked at the sites across numerous dates. And I don't know the exact date at which we visited Clubhouse 1.
I'm just wondering, if, when you're saying this is already a year almost that has passed, and nothing's been done yet. So
Yeah,
I'm
at
getting
this
a little
particular
bit more
point,
concerned.
Bert, I think what we've been told here now is the fact that the immediate meant a year, which means it's not an emergency, which means it doesn't have to get done so that somebody will get hurt tomorrow. And that's what we've also been told by VMS.
But it's also been a year, almost.
I understand that. But the thing right now is at this particular point in time, to me, that year is very subjective when it comes to electrical equipment. There's no moving parts, okay?
Yes, there is moving parts on a circuit breaker.
Well, okay, fine, you're right. If the circuit breaker keeps on being engaged and disengaged, you're correct. So, yes.
Yeah, so we've got a year. Is there going to be a determination on what we're going to do with this pool house that's got this electrical in it? Is it going to be if it's a demolition on Clubhouse 1, is it going to be demolished, or is it going to be, or if it's a remodel, is it going to be remodeled within a year?
I can't answer to the decisions that the board will make in regard to what they're going to do with Clubhouse 1. What I can tell you is our staff is aware of the electrical. They are monitoring it, and if things do become an emergency situation, our staff will be on top of it, and they will take care of it.
And that's what we have to make sure of, okay, because in this situation right now, okay, whether or not they demolish the building or don't, okay, if we have an unsafe condition today sitting in that building and we got to spend $180,000 or whatever it is, then we need to take care of it, and we will make that recommendation to the various boards to do that, okay? But at this particular point in time, we're being told that it's not a dangerous situation.
That's right. Safety is our number one concern.
Okay. Yes, Bert.
Staff, I'm just curious, was this budgeted for the 2020 timeframe?
No, no.
I don't believe that this was budgeted for the 2020. However, we do have budget funding that if there is a problem, it can be dealt with.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments from the dais here? Because the next person I'm going to ask is Steve. Do you have any comments?
No.
Okay, yes.
I'm on the JRF board, Diane Phelps. My question, I think, is quick. So if you felt that people were going to be electrocuted in our pool, you would have said, let's turn this off today and let's shut it down, so that that's not where we are. Okay, and the same with employees. If you felt it was unsafe, then you would have said, this is an emergency, stop. Okay. Thank you.
I think Guy mentioned the equipment is corroded on the exterior. The interior components are okay, and so, yes, of course we would.
I just want to make sure.
Yes. Thank you for the question.
Chair.
And yes,
Is it appropriate to use the words "no imminent danger"? Could you go that far?
I mean, if you'd like for us to, add that into the report, we can add that language. I have heard from BMS after reviewing the report that the term immediate would cause some alarm. And
Exactly.
so in my slides here, I changed the language to prioritize. And so apologies for the alarm that the term has caused.
Well, I think JRF is thinking about liability and risk assessment.
exactly. That's what we're looking at. And I mean, it's not a liability as far as the lawyers are concerned. It's a liability as far as the people in the community are concerned and our workers, okay? I mean, we don't want to have anybody get hurt, and that's the whole issue, okay? So when we say it, when you say the word immediate to me, I say, you better take care of it tomorrow, otherwise somebody's going to get hurt. And that was a term that I read in there. That was my first comment, okay? What do you mean by immediate?
Sure, yes.
So, I mean, as long as now we're having an understanding that we don't have an imminent danger whereby somebody's going to actually get electrocuted or some other sort of problem is going to occur, and we may have a breaker, okay, that basically doesn't trip, but that's another issue altogether, where hopefully that'll not happen, okay, because it's supposed to trip when it's supposed to trip, okay, so, under the circumstances. Anybody else? Yes.
Reza Karimi with 3rd Mitchell. With all this due respect for the subcommittee and or advisor or consultant here, we really need to do 2 studies to understand that there's a corrosion in a pool house. That's unreasonable that we do 2 studies. The only thing we learned, there was corrosion in the pool house. We could do that, any of us could look at that and say, oh, yeah, we have a corrosion. What is all this study? What is the core of the study that only reveals the corrosion in the pool house?
I believe it had to do with the chemicals they're using for the pool, and I believe that that's been moved out of that room.
I know, but that needs 2 studies to do that?
No.
He's asking Marty Hire to consult.
Okay. So, in any case, so anybody have any other questions regarding GRF other than we've gotten our answer to our questions here, and unless we have a specific request for certain things that we don't understand in here, let's just keep this to the fact that they've got these, and if we have any queries about the comments that the responses that you made to our comments, we can put them back in writing to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, that sounds like a good
Okay,
plan.
so under the circumstances right now, I don't want to basically continue on unless you have a particular issue with one of the comments, the responses to your comments that she's made.
I just questioned for
Yeah.
a guy. The report said that they found a transformer over at Clubhouse 4 sitting in the parking lot, brand new. I guess it was crated. And just curious to know what the destination of that transformer was.
So it was a generator, I believe, that they found. Was it not a generator?
No,
Yeah,
it says
it's a
transformer.
generator. I'm
sorry,
not certain,
generator,
but
yeah.
I can check with the staff that replaces those and find out if that's just a replacement and it's on a cycle for replacement.
because Clubhouse 4 does not have a backup generator now. So I was just curious as to why there would be a generator sitting in the parking lot. If you could find-
We'll definitely look into where that generator's designated.
Thank you.
I did see that. I have a note.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else for GRF? Yes, Beth?
I just need to have clarity that we're okay, there's not something or anything that GRF needs to be attending to now immediately for the safety of the community.
You got it.
I believe that's what we were
Yeah,
told.
if there were, we would attend to it immediately. It's, again, our staff has been monitoring that. We know that the design is a flawed design, but it's lasted a very long time. The corrosion that we see is on the exterior of the conduits. It hasn't made its way through, and hopefully at some point we'll have direction what's going to happen with Clubhouse 1. If not, we'll put it on one of the budgets and address it then.
Okay, so what we're having is, this is a heads up that we need to keep an eye on this and maybe do something on it once we find out what we're doing with Clubhouse 1.
That is correct.
And I think we would all here like to go on the record as indicating, okay, that whether or not this building is going to get demoed or not, if we have a dangerous situation and it's going to have to cost us $180,000 to fix until it gets demoed, we need to fix it. And I think everybody on this particular dais would say that same thing. So, if you guys come over and say, oh, we got a dangerous situation here, okay, whether or not it's demoed or not is immaterial. We have to take safety into account, and I think you know that already.
That's correct. And there is a contingency fund through GRF to address those issues.
Right, okay. Yes, Captain?
I just wanted to say, I think it's great that you're doing this, because with the community 50, 60 years old, the electrical equipment, does wear out. As you may or may not know, I was involved in GE back in the 60s in designing of this kind of equipment. The corrosion you see, if it's basically on the conduits and things like that, doesn't mean that it's internal.
Right.
You got to open up the starter panels, you got to take a look. And in working with the water district, we have same issues. You just take your time. It's not going to be something, you don't have the panels where you're going to electrocute anybody as long as they stay away from the panels.
Right.
And so there's not any rush, but it's great to know that this issue has to be addressed when you address Clubhouse 1.
Right.
And this gives you kind of a guideline as to where to go. I've got the same concern in the housing mutuals. The 3-story buildings all have motor control centers in there. You can't even read the nameplate. And I'm more concerned about what the fault levels are. And I don't know whether you checked any of the fault levels to see what is the fault level rating of these panels, because that's critical also. Because if SGE or FCE, the electric utility, if they raise the fault levels to us, then that in itself is going to be a major cost to us, because none of our equipment is going to be capable of handling in higher inrushes on fault. And so this whole thing has to be looked at together. It's not simple, and take your time. There's nothing here that I heard that is urgent, that says it has to be done tomorrow.
Right.
But it has to be done within your planning scope. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate that. Yes?
Okay. My major concern, has been the potential for a huge lawsuit if something did happen. Because VMS says one thing, but you've got a report from a consultant. And that report said that the assessment confirms that this should be remedied within 1 year time to prevent any equipment failures and minimize the hazard exposure to employees. This is in a document that we had received, and I don't know what the legal implications of this would be should something happen. But I would imagine if something did happen, we would go broke.
I believe Guy indicated that they had a electrical person that had a level 3 or whatever it is, that basically came by and said that it's still okay even though we're approaching the year right now.
Is this documented?
Yes.
Is it documented? That's a good point. Is it documented?
Well, it is now.
Well, it should be documented in the
No,
memo.
it is.
I mean, the thing right now is usually in cases myself, okay, you usually write a memo to file to counter what was written there and specifically make sure that you put it in the memo to file and you file it in, okay?
Signed,
And it
too.
gets signed by the various different entities, especially this level 3 guy.
The level 3 guy, so he's a, C10 contractor.
Yeah,
And
whatever.
and he is on our staff, so.
But we still need to have it in writing. We should have it in writing. We should have something
Well, we
in
did ask
writing.
for clarification.
No, I understand.
I believe that the consultant has provided us clarification with the immediate comment.
The protocol would be writing a memo to file indicating that an inspection was done and this person with this pedigree is basically signed off on it. And that's the way it should be done. So, under the circumstances right now. All right, so I guess we're on to the next thing. The only thing that I have, I have a couple of questions in United, but before you even start, the word old style versus new style transformer. I don't understand the word style when the word transformer was basically being used. Those usually don't come in the same sentence, okay, to me, okay, but I'm just asking.
Yeah, good question.
So old style transformers typically just the connections are moved the same. It's the same philosophy on how they transform.
And that's the term you use, old style and new style? Is that what you use in a technical document? I'm just
Yeah, can you
asking.
come up to the podium, please?
So it's kind of commonly referred. It really matters where the connections are in the transformer, and so a lot of different people use different terms. So, oh, that's an old style. It's connected in the back instead of the front, or stuff like that. It has no bearing on the inside. It's just essentially kind of where the connections are at. So.
Okay, I've never heard the word style in a technical report before. Sorry, never heard it. Thanks. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. Great question. So jumping into United Mutual, I have a similar slide as GRF, just reviewing the task 1. And again, here our task was to perform an assessment of the community's electrical infrastructure. And our approach was to perform a review of the community's electrical systems and infrastructure for the current state. Okay, here we go. So the objectives were similar but different here. And so with the objectives to identify deficiencies and accommodate existing load, we wanted to address the questions about what United Mutual needs to address now to avoid outages and damage to electrical infrastructure equipment. And the long-term action, what should United Mutual focus on in the next 5 to 10 years to ensure the electrical infrastructure can withstand increasing EV charging loads? And I'll comment that this will be addressed further in task 2, and that's later on in the agenda. We'll dive into task 2 a little more. So our data gathering process was similar to Golden Rain Foundation, and so I'm not going to elaborate too much more, but I will say the conversations back and forth with SCE were relevant and applicable to United Mutual as well. And here, the lack of information that SCE was willing to provide on the transformer capacities and locations was a little more challenging for us. We couldn't we anticipated being able to look community-wide at every single transformer and the loads, but SCE has very specific confidentiality rules, and so they would not provide us with the loads on those transformers. And some of the transformers, when we were looking at the sampled areas, we couldn't find them, and again, SCE wouldn't provide us with that information. And what's different about United and Third transformers is that the load from the transformers on the sampled areas, the load is coming not just from the carports and the laundry rooms, the load is coming from residential units in the same vicinity. And so while we were able to get load information from the SCE customer, specifically on the laundry rooms and carports, we could not obtain residential electric utility information from those residences. And so we couldn't calculate the total load on those transformers. I hope that makes sense. We can clarify during the questions if there's additional questions on that. And so we, for our site visits, due to the size of the community and similarities across the infrastructure, we selected a representative sample sites to evaluate. All of the carports and laundry facilities are very similar electrically. And so the focus of the choices was to get a sample of the sites that would be representative of geographic areas that may have been constructed at different times. And the outliers there were the laundry rooms with solar installations. And so for United, we inspected transformers and switch gears at common laundry areas and residential carport cul-de-sacs. We also inspected solar panel electrical panels for a couple of laundry rooms. And the site dates are in the report. Again, we used a similar equipment asset condition evaluation criteria, looking at the 4 different criteria and rated the assets on these criteria. And similarly, the Appendix B in the report shows a summary of how all the inspected assets were rated. And so here are a summary of the findings. Again, VMS staff is doing a great job in maintaining this decades-old electrical infrastructure. On the right-hand side of this slide here is a screenshot from the appendix I mentioned, showing the inspected gear and the asset condition rating. The majority of laundry room equipment is original to the facilities. The condition of the assets ranged from poor to excellent. The transformers we inspected are in adequate to excellent condition. Electrical equipment replaced during solar installations is also generally in excellent condition. And the summary is in Appendix B. And so moving on to some of the key findings in general, the laundry room 125 and 150 amp main panels and circuit breakers serving the laundry rooms and carports are in poor condition. Circuits are undersized for the current load, except for those that have been replaced, which was generally in relation to where the solar is. And the circuit feeding the carports have experienced overloads due to multiple EVs charging at the same time and other load plugged in at the carport outlets. And so I have a note here on the slide that increasing the EV charging load will result in circuit overloads and outages if the infrastructure is not upgraded. And we do understand that the community, they do have systems in place, to charge certain times with your neighbors, and they coordinate. But additional load at the same time can cause some issues. And so we developed the reports and recommendations, which are here. And so in terms of short-term recommendations, we recommend to prioritize repairs to the carport circuits that are fed from the laundry room panels. This is a priority because breakers are not meant to be on and off devices. They do have a limited life, and so it's not great to continue turning the breaker on. Also, a new 20 amp circuit needs to be added per carport to address overload due to excessive EV charging. A new 20 amp circuit is a short-term solution. However, if significant loads are added, like level 2 EV chargers or other generation, storage, or consumption, the panels will need to be upgraded. In Task 2, which I'll spend some time later on in the presentation, we'll hone in on how the circuits and panels would need to be upgraded to accommodate such additional loads. And so that would be a point of the future investigation. So before adding electrical loads, electrical load calculation analyses would need to be performed to confirm equipment capacity for additional load, and that would be part of Task 2. And then in terms of long-term recommendations, we The upgrades are we recommend maintaining regular inspection cycles of the equipment. And our understanding is that VMS staff do have regular inspections and are refining their preventative maintenance plan. On the right-hand side, I have estimated budget costs here. These estimates are derived in a similar fashion to Golden Rain Foundation and would need to go through a detailed spec and bid process. Okay. And so on the next slide here, this is the estimated build-out upgrade cost. This is summarizing the cost for the recommended short-term upgrades. And VMS provided details on the number of laundry rooms and carports across United. And so this was used to estimate the upgrade costs across the mutual. So based on the findings, the estimated upgrade costs range from $1.86 million to $2,050,000. I just want to point out the assumptions made here are listed on the bottom of the slide. Given that we could not inspect 163 laundry rooms nor 805 carports individually, we assumed that similar facilities across the community require the same short-term upgrades. The recommended upgrades do not assume additional load is added to the current infrastructure. We're assuming a more static baseline. And also, these recommendations are subject to change based on the EV strategies and charging that we'll be identifying in Task 2. And so in terms of next steps, the results from this assessment will be used to develop the community-wide strategy for electrical infrastructure upgrades and EV charging installations. And again, we'll spend some more time on Task 2 later in the agenda. And so now I'd like to open up the floor for questions.
Questions? Anybody on the dais? I have some questions, but I'll wait for somebody else. Okay, my questions had to do with the fact that in your report, you seem to indicate that the only thing that we should be doing is upgrading all of the 20-amp circuits. And you indicate that a yearly inspection of the breakers, okay, would be all that would be required. That's what I think I remember reading. However, under the circumstances when we have all of these breakers that keep popping, and we have a number of people where they are electrical vehicles, they're basically plugging in two vehicles at the same time, and 20 amps is not going to be equal to the amount of amps that they actually need for those two vehicles, okay, so they keep popping the breakers. With that, why wouldn't you recommend that we do at least monthly inspections of these breakers as a minimum and change out those breakers, because at this particular point in time, we're not ready to spend $1.8 million?
So we thought annually would be good for staff, because going to the amount of carports and trying to do that monthly is a very large undertaking. The other thing with just changing out the breaker to a bigger one, unfortunately, when you size breakers, you size the wire itself.
No, I'm not asking to increase the size of the breaker. You have a 20 amp breaker that's basically got 12 gauge cable that's going to it, okay?
Right.
You're not going to basically put a 40 amp, okay, breaker on a 12 gauge thing. You just can't do it.
Exactly.
Okay? We understand that. So that's what I'm saying, okay? What I'm saying is that if we have 20 amp circuits and every time they pop, I assume somebody gets out there to basically to push the breaker back in. Is that correct?
Yes, when we receive those calls, someone is dispatched.
And that gets
to do-
logged in, okay, that this particular breaker popped. So you have a log, and this particular breaker now has popped 17 times in the last month. We say to ourselves, you know, maybe we need to go out there and change that breaker out, because this 18th time, maybe it will not open when it's supposed to.
So it's not that they're just opening to open. The breakers operate off amps. So anytime there's a load plugged in, so if you replace that breaker and two people plugged in their EV charger, it's still gonna.
That's correct. We understand that. Yes. We understand that. The thing right now is, okay, we want to make sure that when it's trying to draw 25 amps, okay, it pops. And then the next time when it's supposed to pop, and it doesn't pop because it's basically old and ragged because it's popped about 25 times already.
Right.
I mean, we want to make sure that the breaker pops when it's supposed to, when it's basically seeing 25 amps and it's only supposed to see 20 amps. So what I'm saying is in the interim, you people did not address a possible a short-term fix. You said, in the short term, spend $1.8 million. Well, that's a lot of money to spend in the short term, okay? To me, it would have been upgrade your maintenance, make sure that the particular breaker, this particular breaker has popped about 17 times, and we really don't want it to pop 18 times, so we'll replace the breaker, and we'll do this ongoing and spend maybe $150 or $200 each time to basically put this fix together so we don't have a situation where we're basically having a possible fire in that panel.
I'll just comment, we weren't provided with any logs, and our scope was not necessarily maintenance related. It was.
No, I understand that, but the first thing was on the short term, you say $1.8 million. That's a short-term fix. To me, that's a lot of money to be in the short term. I mean, I'm looking. You guys are saying, but you did note the fact that these things were popping. And the first thing that you said was, short-term fix, we should upgrade all of these 20-amp circuits, okay? And we need to have a short-term fix right now that addresses it in the short term. And the long term is spend $1.8 million to me. I mean, unless somebody else has got a different...
That's part of the solution. When we're recommending adding a circuit, it's essentially breaking up that load. So
Understood.
you're not having additional.
And we have to run another conductor to that particular thing, and we have to make sure that there's enough amperage available in that transformer, okay, to take care of that, and blah, 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 blah. We understand all of that. But to run all of that cable and have you is not something you can do overnight. So the first thing that you would do is upgrade your maintenance so that you basically don't have a fire in that particular panel if you're saying that they're popping all the time. And you're right, they're not supposed to pop. These are not switches, these are breakers. I'm just asking.
Right, so they would be, if they're popping, they're operating correctly.
Correct.
So, and in that point, we can't monitor how many people are plugging into every outlet, and I don't think they have.
No, it wasn't. It's not a part of this. I do understand. It's not a part of the scope, and I wouldn't recommend a program to go around replacing breakers. First of all, we'd have to test every breaker. I mean, where are we the staff to go around and test breakers on a, I mean, how do you put that program together?
I'm not looking to basically test the breakers. I'm saying right now, if your guy has gone out there 25 times for the same breaker, then we have 25 times that breaker is popped. How many times is a breaker supposed to pop before all of a sudden it starts basically losing its popping ability?
I don't have that.
We don't know.
information
We don't
off
know.
the top
But the
of my
thing
head,
right now is you basically make an assumption as to what it would be, okay? Because these breakers are supposed to be on and they're off. They're not supposed to be switches.
I don't know that we're having a problem with failure of these breakers. If we do, they go out there when they get a call. If the breakers pop, they'll test the breaker at that point to see whether it remains or if it gets replaced. So as we receive the maintenance calls when these breakers do pop, they are tested at that point, and if they're still in good condition, they'll remain. If they're tested to fail, then they'll be replaced. That's the ongoing.
But understood. But the thing right now is in the short term, in this report, it says you should change out all these 20-amp circuits in the short term. I mean, it wasn't like a long-term thing. It was in the short term.
Understood.
I read those words, okay?
No, I understood. But we already do replace the breakers when they fail.
Agree.
And so we are
Agree.
doing that.
Right.
That method right now. However, we're not saying if it breaks 20 times, we're just going to automatically replace it. When they go out after the breaker's been called in as failing, they test the breaker at that point. If it still is functional, they'll leave it in place. If it's not functional, they'll remove it and replace it with a new breaker.
Okay. Sue?
How many times are the breaker flipping? Because there's certain areas that they are in that there are two cars in. How many times have we seen this? Do you have a log of it?
There is a log. There, when these calls come in, Resident Services takes down the number or the manner that's making the request for someone to come out. So that data is somewhere that we can extract and put into a report.
Do you have any sense of how many calls you're getting?
I really don't personally right now, but we can pull that information.
Okay, because I think that's important to us to know the frequency and the amount of calls we're getting. Because
I agree.
Yeah, because the thing right now is, okay, while we do have a number of people that have EV charging, there are priority areas, because in certain areas, we've got more EV charging cars, cars that require EV charging, okay, than in other areas, okay? And as a result of that, in these areas, the neighbors have tried to get together and make sure that they don't plug into theirs the same time that their neighbor is plugging in, because they don't like the fact that they keep on having these things pop on them. So as a result of that, it's happening, okay? But we just don't want to, if we're having an issue whereby they're popping all the time and we have the possibility of a failure that's going to cause a possible fire because the overamping condition continues, and as a result of that, you have a possible fire, then obviously that's something you have to address. But I don't think that anybody here is expected to spend $1.8 million tomorrow in the short term.
And that's why I'm trying to tell you, we manage them as they're called in, and we test them at that time.
Great.
However, there may not be as many calls as we might think, because people tend to go and turn the
Reset the
breaker
breaker
back,
themselves.
reset it themselves.
Yeah, understood. Yes?
When you're solving this problem or looking at this type of transition, what you're trying to do essentially, I guess, is to have everybody charge their own car within their own specific carport. And that's where it's going to become costly. Okay? You'd have to actually, you don't know how many, depending upon the load, how many cars are you going to be able to charge simultaneously, even with the transition that you're suggesting. Okay, so you're going to wind up right back with that same problem. Were you aware that within the past 2-3 years, United had changed out their hot water heaters, where they at one point in time had 100 amps being drawn by hot water heaters, and they're now down to 20 amps. So there's an 80 amp spare capacity. In addition, they've gone from lighting to 60-watt lighting to LED lighting. In other words, and they've reduced the dryer, one less dryer. So there's probably a 90 to 100 amp reserve, okay, within the panel today of the laundry room. As an alternative, wouldn't it make more sense to consider putting in 2 level 2 EV charging stations?
So that's where task 2 comes into play, and we were looking at the infrastructure as it sits today and seeing and doing interviews with the guys to see where kind of the problems occurred, and so they mentioned frequent breaker tripping on carports. So but task 2 will outline different strategies. So if you wanted to do level 2 charging at a certain area, that it wouldn't cost.
But I understood,
Crazy.
and I'd like to go on record here right now, Guy, okay, that we have people in this task force that have the expertise and some knowledge of this particular thing, plus knowledge since they live in the community, that before they go into task 2, where they're really biting off big chunks of it, okay, that we have a sit-down meeting with these people, okay, and discuss what we know with them, and then they will get feedback from us, and we give them feedback, and then they don't have to go down, they may take the left turn, and they really needed to take the right turn, okay? So that's what I would like to make sure that we happen, okay, at this particular point in time.
Yeah, it's my understanding that we're going to take these reports to M&C, and then any further direction will come from the M&C.
Understood, but I'm saying in the interim right now, to just basically have a little discussion, okay, to give them a little bit of a leg up as to where it needs to go with this thing based on the information at this table. Because the dais here has a lot of good information, okay, that we'd like to share with these people before they go into task 2, and then they spend a lot of money, and then we find out we're not really happy with the report that they come up with.
I think that's where we need to go with
So we can, there can be an arrangement made to where you can have that time with the consultants to give them that feedback.
that. And we'd like to make sure that that happens, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, Bill?
Yeah, for somebody who's not familiar with this, what is the serviceable life of the switching gear? We've got 50-year-old buildings with service panels in them. We've got wiring that's 50 years old coming into those service panels. I have no idea what we're going to be, I don't know to make a decent decision. If we've got 50-year-old service panels, are they going to last another 50 years to 100 years? Or is it something that GR, or particularly United and Third, are going to have to really look at? And maybe I'm jumping into task 2, but since we went down that road for a minute, those are things that are crossing people's minds, is how serviceable are these going to be, particularly when we start adding more load, even if we add more circuits? I don't know if there's an answer. I'm sure it's variable depending,
Yeah, sure, I'll take that. My name is Rich Williams. I'm with PRC, and I know our estimator that did the estimates for switchgear replacement, panel replacement that were included in that large cost. He was using a 40-year lifetime and actually adding 10 years to that. So you were about right in the 50-year lifetime. So it is expected that adding additional circuits to these older vintage panels will take its toll. So some of those panels must be replaced. And those were the specific panels that he noted exhibited the most wear and tear during the audits of the selected sites we did audit. So that is not comprehensive of every switchgear, every panel throughout the premises. That is noting the specific ones that we noted were in worse for wear shape.
Yeah, and I guess my point is then ultimately United and Third particularly probably need to establish a program for changing the switching gear out, regardless of anything to do with PEVs. Mm-hmm. So when you get to task 2, we probably need to address that part of the variables.
Yeah, definitely. I certainly agree with that. And I also certainly agree with what Carl was saying, to sit down and kind of have a one-on-one on the specific components, specific circuits, specific carports that are giving the most trouble. Because as you do say, that 1.8 million is a large sum just to drop, of course. And so what we're not saying, because we haven't delved into task 2, is that there would need to be a phased approach that, to go along with what you were saying, Carl, would be phased in to address the most, the highest issues, the areas where we're tripping all the time, where we look at that log and we see the frequency is off the charts. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish and implement in task 2, of course, along with everyone else's cooperation and collaboration, because having that leg up, as you said, will be extremely useful for our team.
And for me, then we've got Southern California Edison in all of this. And when we start changing out panels, if we want more amperage coming through, we want bigger service, we're going to need to know how we're going to address that with SCE. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Exactly. So I think that logically, just kind of off the cusp, seeing the need that we have by us all having a conversation, and then that load analysis we're talking about in task 2 would identify those points where we're going to need to talk to SCE and say, hey, we need this much more capacity, we need this much more delivery. And that would be certainly a conversation for a later time. And as we've seen, it is a little outstretched to have a conversation with SCE in some cases. So us being proactive in that will certainly be paramount to everything.
Yeah, and if you don't see any, and if we have that meeting with you and you don't see the people, the faces in this room in that meeting with you, you'll have to make mention of the fact that those people are not there, okay? Because we want to be in that meeting, okay, with you to make sure that you have that additional information that you need to get the real task 2 job done correctly. Yes, Bert?
Yeah, I just also want to add that I think you've got to look at the tariffs when you're going to propose a solution, okay? Because the tariffs for charging, okay, as opposed to the tariffs you're paying for the electricity in a laundry room, could be considerably different. One being time of use and another being some other fixed type of cost. There are so many different tariffs that you got to look at. And we have to also consider that when you're taking into account what are you looking at for a solution.
Okay, I will note
Okay.
that. And as well as if there's any information that we can have sent to us for folks who may not be able to attend, whether that's a conference call or what it might
Yeah.
be, that would always be an avenue to get that
We'll make that
information as well.
arrangement, yes, we will definitely make that arrangement.
Great.
Thank you,
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time. So, anybody else have a question here on the dais? Steve?
I'd actually like to sit in the seat with a microphone because there are a lot of issues here. Why don't you have a seat? I'm going to be a while. Go ahead. So I'd like to know who here from Tech and TRC was at the May 20th meeting this year with staff? 20th. May 20th.
I've been at most of the meetings.
Okay.
except for Microgrid.
Do you recall a meeting where I was present?
With the SCE, right?
No.
June. Yes.
One meeting in May where I was present. Okay. My biggest problem with this report, as it applies to United and to many parts of Third, there are several key points. Number one, this task force, over the period of more than a year, repeatedly requested to be involved in the meetings with Tech and TRC when they were held with staff. We were not afforded that opportunity. Staff played gatekeeper. After Bill's services chair and Bert's services chair, when I became chair, I went to Ernesto Munoz and I said, look, we're spending money with consultants. We don't know what questions they're asking. We don't know what you're telling them. And the complexion of the people on this task force is deep with knowledge that your staff may not have. Based on that initial conversation I had with Ernesto, I asked him if he would share email correspondence between himself and the consultants with me. And he said he would. Didn't happen. Within a few weeks after that meeting in Ernesto's office, he sent me an email that said, we're having a meeting on May 20th. You are invited to attend. And I did. And I listened for the most part through the meeting. A lot of the stuff had to deal with SCE and not being able to get information, and how are you going to do the transformers and sampling and a variety of subjects. But I specifically recall going over the condition of the laundry rooms in United. This report talks about replacing 163 panels or something at one point. Okay? I informed everyone in the room that under the contract with JCI, when the solar was installed, that of the 175 laundry rooms, 82 of the pushmatic panels were replaced with new panels and circuit breakers. So why I'm looking at a report that talks about over 90 needing replacement, I do not understand. Number two, I also went to great lengths to explain that out of the 175 laundry rooms that we have, and there are so many references to carports here, I don't know what a carport is. Is it a single building? C120, C121, It says there are 805 carports. My information given to me by staff years ago is that United has 811. Not a big deal, but again, an inconsistency in what I know and was provided for by staff years ago and what the consultant is representing in the report. I also explained that of the 175 laundry rooms, there were a limited number of 20 amp circuits to service the outlets in the carports. And if my math is correct, of the 6,323 units in United, there is a dual outlet in between each of 2 car parking spaces. So take 6,323 and divide it by 2, and that's how many outlets you got. Plus or minus in special circumstances where there may be an end unit in a carport building where there's not an additional space. I also explained that it would be impossible from a cost basis to install new 20 amp, 120 volt circuits for everybody who wanted to have charging because of the expense. And in this report, it says $15 to $20 per linear foot. And that's fine if you're within 100 feet or your parking spaces from a laundry building. But if you're 400 feet away, yikes, okay? So this 1.8 million or 2 million or whatever as an estimate, in my opinion, has no foundation in any fact. And I was also very explicit about stating that United previously had 2 50-gallon hot water heaters, each one on a 50 amp circuit. And all the laundry rooms, those 2 50-gallon tanks were pulled and replaced by a 20-gallon Rheem hot water heater, not a heat pump water heater, which is mentioned in this report. And that the circuit size for the new 20-gallon heater was 20 amps, yielding a net savings of 80 unused amps. That in the long run would support a dual bollard level 2 charger, and each line on that dual bollard would have its own 40 amp circuit being capable of delivering 7.2 kW to the car being charged. And that those costs were somewhere in the neighborhood of about $20,000. But if you took that into consideration and said out of a 24-hour day, those bollards were not being used 8 hours because people were sleeping, that's 16 hours of usage on each one of those 2 lines. And given that most plug-in hybrid vehicles have small batteries, under 17 kW, they have limited range, and they would put on 25 miles of charge per hour, and they have less than a 50-mile range. If you do the math in your head, you can charge dozens of vehicles every day from 2 40-amp circuits, which are already available. I was very specific about this in the meeting. I think those of you on the dais know my background in this and know that I speak pretty plainly and clearly. So I'm very surprised at having going through all of these pages of information we already knew, but in my mind are of no value and was just, it was unneeded. And as far as doing task 2, to figure out what we're going to do, until we have reports from staff that show us all of the plug-in electric vehicles in this community and where they are, and the growth pattern on a monthly basis, and the density changes, neither United nor Third will be able to allocate funds properly so that where the charging is needed, it can be implemented. This is further exacerbated by the point that if you just take a number, you have 175 laundry rooms and I believe 104 cul-de-sacs in United. I know because I went out and counted all the parking spaces one year in all of them. If it cost you $20,000 to put a dual bollard at each one, are you talking about $3.5 million? Do you think United is going to spend $3.5 million putting a dual bollard charging station at each laundry? I don't think so, because you couldn't even probably justify that over a course of a decade, even with the exponential growth in the adoption of plug-in hybrid vehicles or BEV, pure battery vehicles. Okay? We used to have 3 plug-in vehicles in this community 6 years ago. We have well over 180, in my opinion, last numbers that I saw. We've had substantial growth very quickly. One of my main focus points over the last 5 or 6 years has been people can charge at destinations. And people say, but GRF won't pay for the charging stations. And my reply is, GRF gets its funds from the residents of the mutuals. So whether the mutuals pay for expenses to put chargers in individual cul-de-sacs, or whether you put chargers at Clubhouse 2, which is a destination, and people go golfing and go to the 19, whether you put them at Clubhouse 7, which is actively used for bridge and other things, you may be better off having destination charging at GRF facilities that within the mutuals. Last thing I want to say is I am not an electrical engineer. However, when I see remarks about frequent breaker trips, and in these questions, the responses have been, where did you get the information? Well, staff gave it to us verbally. And as you've heard, there have been no presentation of any numbers. And what the severity of this is. I have personally received letters from residents about their individual problem in their cul-de-sac. But as we originally implemented the level 1 charging structures in both United and Third, we knew this was a temporary stopgap that would not support the entire community for very long. And the cost of putting an additional 20 amp circuits, which only yield you about 4 to 5 miles of charge per hour plugged in, rather than 25 on a level 2, or perhaps 200 on a DC fast charger, like we have 3 of them back here now. How many breaker trips are there? We don't know. Well, how did you know about them? Staff told us about them. Well, did they tell you how many? No, they just they told us we were having breaker trips. This community has been having breaker trips in laundry rooms since electric golf carts were adopted. When this community was built starting in 1963, I would venture most of the golf carts were gasoline. And over the years into the 70s and 80s, that changed into electric. People have been sharing the circuits and charging their golf carts for decades. And it was one of the things that we discussed that would have to be done. Referring to the EV chargers, as they do, being 15 amps of draw is entirely incorrect. What you see hanging out of the outlet is service equipment. It's known as EVSE. The chargers for the cars are in the cars, under the hood. That's where the charging takes place from the conversion from the AC to the DC. Okay? all of the level 1 chargers that you will find from any manufacturers, to the best of my knowledge, unless it's changed in a very recent period of time, are rated at 15 amps. However, they don't draw 15 amps all the time. And the manufacturers, some manufacturers, not all, have put software in the automobiles. So if you lived in a house, say, on the East Coast, which was several hundred years old, that still had some form of wiring and used fuses rather than circuit breakers, and you only had a 15 amp fuse available, you can go to the car and say, charge at 12 amps, charge at 8 amps, charge at 5 amps. So a blanket statement that says if you plug 2 cars in on the same circuit at the same time, you're going to trip the circuit is not representative of the technology in many of the automobiles. So I just wanted to make those statements because, again, I went to the meeting. I had to fight long and hard to get into a meeting after I became chair of this task force. The sharing of information it has not ever been consistent between staff and this task force, and it's led to reports and information like this. Unnecessary reporting on things we already knew, okay? And we're supposedly hiring consultants to help us map out our problems, and we know what our problems are, but they're investigating what our problems may be. We already know what they are. And with that, oh, finally, life and trips on circuit breakers. I don't know. How do you find out? Well, Google it. 30-year service life. Number of trips on a breaker? In the thousands over the life of the breaker. That's pretty much how they're built. They're electromechanical, plastic, metal sprung things, switches, right? So when somebody says, well, I don't know what the life cycle is, I don't know what their duty rating is, these are things that are very easily found out. And what I became concerned with from the report, which was a good thing, was as I thought about the fact that if we've replaced 82 of the Pushmatics with brand new equipment, okay, we have the balance of the laundry rooms, which have equipment which is the GE style, but they're original equipment, built in the 60s, or you can find out what phase and what year cul-de-sacs and laundry rooms and the surrounding buildings were built. This is information we have on file. What United needs and what Third needs is anything that has a freestanding laundry needs to have its service records pulled to find out when, if ever, the circuit breakers have been replaced, to now determine a scope of work, where you want to start and how you want to start. Because I don't think you're going to go on another 350 or 400,000 venture to trade out the last 90 or so original GE panels that have not been replaced for $4,000 a piece.
Okay, thanks.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. We invited this consultant here.
But the thing
to
right
listen
now
to
is,
them.
okay, his points are very valid, okay?
They are,
The thing right now
but
is,
not
okay,
a-
that these people put the report together, and they did a great job, but based on the information that they were given. But you know the old expression, garbage in equals garbage out.
Understood.
And unfortunately, right now, this is what we've got. So for phase two, before we even go into venture into phase two, we definitely need to have a sit-down, because we have a lot of ideas on this task force here that we need to impart to these people, because at this particular point in time, we spent a bunch of money, and they did a great job, but unfortunately, it wasn't what was anticipated from us.
We needed to
But
write
that's
it
another
down to
story.
give it to
And it's
them
not
what
their
we
fault, but under the circumstances, this is where we need to go. So Steve needed to say that, because right now, we need to get the record straight.
And that's where we are with this particular record.
We need to give this in writing, what our expectations are, so we get a proper response. Because if we don't give them a proper request, then we're going to get this kind of.
I totally understand. I agree.
So let's move on and
I
get
understand.
it done.
But the
I
thing
don't
right
want to
now
spend
is,
the
okay,
whole
these.
Friday afternoon here listening to this lecture, which is like.
Okay, well, you can call it a lecture, I can call it information, so.
Great.
There we go, okay, we can agree to disagree. In any case, yes, Catherine?
I was going to comment originally when you just said keep, as an individual in your house, yeah, you go reset the circuit breaker. Those things are designed, and Steve's right, we tested them for millions of times. However, it depended upon what the fault level is causing the trip. And if the fault level happens to be higher, then the life is going to be shorter. And that's what you don't know. It's basically tied, whether it was basically just slow overload, so it was a thermal detection, or whether there happened to be some kind of fault that caused it in a trip. You don't know those things, and so I would never recommend to anybody that if they got a circuit breaker that keeps tripping, then you really need to take a whole look at that whole circuit and change out the circuit breaker appropriately and rewire the circuit. That's just good electrical practice. That's what the code would require you to do. And so we really got to be careful on some of this. I find, frankly, going through the report, what they're trying to do, in my opinion, with phase one, is just say, where are we and what do we have? Once you have that understanding, then you can basically begin to lay out the strategy for going forward. A lot of what Steve was talking about, he's already done his own personal assessment, so he's saying, this is the way we ought to go. I think the rest of you have to get on board to basically understand that, because it's going to be expensive. One of the things that they haven't touched on, and I don't know if they were asked to, back in the 60s and early 70s, we used aluminum wiring.
Yeah.
We didn't use copper wiring. I know when I was on third board, part of the instructions was every year we make sure we go and tighten the lugs on every one of the switch panels on the side of the buildings, because aluminum expands at a different rate relative to heat than copper does. And unless you're tightening those lugs annually, you could start a fire just on that. And so we need to understand that. There's a lot here we really need to understand before you start going forward and saying, this is where we're going to go, and this is how we're going to do it.
Understood. And then one of the things right now, okay, by indicating that subjectively, that we've had a lot of breakers that have been popping as a result of the fact that overloads due to the fact that people are plugging in both their vehicles simultaneously or what have you. We need to have an understanding of where they are, how many of these things there are, and how many times they're happening, okay? And this record needs to be kept, because now we're getting a lot of that at the carports, a lot more than what we had in the past. And we're going to have a lot more in the future because of the EV cars that are coming out.
And I understand. I applaud you for doing this. Take your time and let's get it right.
Right. Okay.
Let's get the third.
So let's get the third. Probably the third is the same as United.
Okay, let's jump in. So third had the same objectives as United, so I think I'll skip through those. The task one was identical, looking at the infrastructure for the current state. Same data was gathered for third mutual. Same challenges with SCE are applicable. We visited a representative sampling of sites. Most multifamily residential facilities that are of similar size are also electrically very similar. The focus of the fielded sites was to get a sampling representative of the different types of units in the area. We inspected transformers and switch gears at the parking garages and buildings listed on the slide, and one of the single-family homes. And we also inspected the solar panel, electrical panel installation at C219. The same equipment asset condition evaluation criteria was used for the sites visited. And here are the findings. So most equipment we found was original to the facility and not upgraded except for the solar sites. The majority of assets are rated as adequate to good. The parking garages are experiencing similar outages to those in United Mutual. We also noted that there's a higher concentration of vehicles charging on the same outlets. And so in terms of the key findings, the existing main and residential panels are in marginal condition. There are undersized circuits serving garage outlets that are overloaded, causing multiple circuit trips. Many residents are charging golf cart batteries off of 120-volt circuits, causing overloads. And similar to United, increasing the EV charging load will result in circuit overloads and outages. And so in terms of recommendations and estimated costs, we recommend prioritizing repairs to the outlet circuit that are fed from the house panels. Also, adding additional 20 amp circuits to the garage to accommodate the EV charging demand, and at least 2 additional circuits are recommended. An additional analysis on this recommendation is part of task 2 to determine, once we determine the recommended charging site locations across the community. Similar estimated costs on the right-hand side, and we recommend Laguna Woods Village or Third conduct regular annual inspection cycles to ensure the system integrity. And the next slide here is showing the overarching estimated upgrade costs with the findings where the costs range from $1.45 million to $1.6 million based on the number of laundry rooms, parking garages, parking garage circuits, and carports, with the assumptions similar to those made for United Mutual. And the next steps would be to continue with task 2 in the community-wide strategy for EV charging. So I'll stop here and address questions.
Yes.
I have a question on this Southern Edison correspondence timeline, which is, to me, is very disturbing. Like on January 14th, it says SCE provides an invoice for the data they were unable to collect. Who did they provide an invoice to, you or us?
They invoiced us.
For money, for data they wouldn't give you?
They were able to provide some of the data, but not all of the data that was requested.
And you never got any answer why they were not cooperative, other than privacy?
So there's a lot of, I don't know why they weren't cooperative. I think there's a lot of departments at SCE, and they don't all communicate that well. And so we kept, as you might be able to see from these notes here, we kept getting sent to a new department to explain exactly what we were doing time and time again. And then we would get sent to the next person. And we ended up getting sent in a circle around the departments because no one knew how to get us the information that was requested or give us a definitive answer about the data that was being requested.
Thank you.
So, Guy, when is the third MNC going to consider this data?
We can put it on for the next MSC on their agenda for an update.
And
Cush will need to approve that.
Will TEC be there?
No, it would just be a report from staff, an update.
I should think that we would want TEC to be there if third MNC is going to be giving it hard consideration and making decisions.
We will bring the report if the committee decides that they want us to bring in TEC, then we will definitely make those arrangements. They are at a cost, and unless that cost is approved for them to be there.
What considerations are we thinking about? For all I'm concerned right now, this is a lot of information right now. I mean, I don't think there's anything of any significance to basically make any decisions on right now. We haven't even gone to phase 2, and we have to get some sort of a game plan together as to what phase 2 is actually going to be and what it's going to take root and what it's going to look like or what have you, okay? I mean, what are you guys going to be looking at?
Would it be helpful to go through the task 2, our proposed outline and some of the scope items?
Well, I mean, the thing right now is your scope and your phase 2 right now is based on what you thought it was supposed to be.
Right.
But the thing right now is, I think you've gotten the information at this meeting that we don't agree with what possibly phase 2 is going to, what task 2 is going to be. I think we want to talk about that first, I believe, unless somebody tell me something different on this dais, okay?
Okay, how do you define immediate repairs are needed?
That's what they just said before. They changed that.
So this would, again, we will bring the update to the committee, the MNC committee. At that point, the MNC committee can give us direction on how they would like us to proceed, and we'll take that direction.
We can take this to the MNC meeting, which is in the beginning of November, and give them an update. And from there, make a decision how to move forward. Or understand our needs to move.
Chairs of the MNC are here, so.
So direction can be given that you want this to go back to a task force and discussed, or maybe a scope of work be developed for the consultant to follow, and then back to the MNC for approval?
I think we need to have basically a working meeting with these folks first, okay, before we put anything in writing. I don't think we have an understanding just yet about what it is. Steve pointed out a number of things whereby there were forks in the road, and we took the wrong fork, it seems, okay? We would like to see whether or not we're going down the road that we need to be going down first, okay? I mean, Third can do whatever they want, but at this particular point in time, I don't think I can bring anything to United and MNC committee to specifically state that this is what we want to do. I don't want to spend $1.8 million right now. There are other ways we can fix certain problems right now. And eventually, as was indicated by Bert, for EV charging, possibly we want to look at the possibility of putting EV chargers in the laundry areas first before we start running infrastructure and upgrading cable and what have you, okay? So there are so many different avenues that we can go down right now, and I don't think we have enough information to go down those avenues to even bring it before an MNC committee.
Response,
my personal
Bill?
opinion.
Response, Bill? Response, Bert?
I agree with Carl. I think you need more information.
Yes.
I believe we need more data, and we are not getting it from our staff. We need data on where these cars are, how many cars we have, what's going on with how many circuit breakers are flipping, what's happening there, and we need much more data, and we need to have that before we can even begin to look at what the scope of work should be. At this point in time, we're going like this. Well, let's put it there.
Can I just make a comment? We actually have been provided with the EV information across the community and have started initiating some of that analysis about where the hot spots are for
the data is
load.
bad.
We'd like to know what that is.
We've looked at that data, and it's not complete.
It's not complete. And we'd like to share that with you also, okay? I mean, we'd like to share some of this information with you first before you go down. You take that left-hand fork, okay, and you really need to go down that right-hand fork. I mean, there's X amount of dollars left in your budget to basically caretaker to us, and we want to make sure that it's used the correct way, okay, to give us the biggest bang for our buck. And if we're not going to get the biggest bang for our buck, then what the heck was the sense of going through this whole evolution?
The data is bad. What we have looked at, what you're getting is bad data. And unfortunately, that's what we have right now. And that has to be cleaned up before you can even begin to work. And that's what we need to do.
If you got the report that we got at our last meeting, on electric vehicles or pluggable vehicles with like 400 or 500 vehicles that included Priuses, which were non-pluggable. Okay, they were hybrids, but they weren't pluggable. Okay, and then I own 2 electric pluggable vehicles, and I wasn't even in the initial report. So you can bet your bottom dollar that you're not getting good information. We have requested for more than 2 years now, okay, that we include when people register their car, that the car VIN number be included so that we could pick up the power source, which we felt was very important to have. We're still waiting for that. So that's a problem we have with staff. Let me point a few other things out. Correction on where you talk about solar installations, and you say that these are in the community for Third, mainly located on top of carports. They're located on top of the 3-story buildings. Third does not have any solar on top of carports, okay?
We did mention that.
But here's the other thing that I did want to cover. You indicate that on the 19th, let me find it. You had a meeting with SCE, right? And they, let's see, the 19th of what? Oh, boy. I had the right page and it got lost.
June, I think, no, May. Let's see.
Yeah, maybe May.
June 19th.
Right. And they indicated that they were going to provide you with information on the loads, the transformers.
They indicated they wouldn't be able to provide that.
They wouldn't be able.
Said wouldn't. Am I reading it wrong?
So what, they told us they couldn't provide us with the community-wide transformer load information. However, through that meeting, we discussed that the community is interested in installing EV chargers, and they want to know, we need to know when we're working through task 2, where the transformers can accommodate those loads. And so SCE said, if we provide them with a list of meters, specific meters, where we know we want to add that load, then they will do an analysis on those transformers specifically, but not community-wide. And so we already took a step based on the bad, whatever data we were provided, sent them a list of 16 or 17 proposed EV charging locations at specific meters. And right now we're kind of in a holding pattern with SCE. They need to collect more information from us about what that load is going to be before they can let us know about the transformer capacities. So
Okay. So they agreed to assess, but they haven't done that.
they agreed to look at some of the specific transformers for the locations in which we are recommending adding load, but based on this conversation, we're gonna we're gonna pause on all of that work because it sounds like we need to make sure we're looking at the right locations.
So we don't have that information.
No.
I want to make sure that you understand, we don't think you did a bad job. We have done a bad job in giving you the right information to work off of, and we think you've tried your best to do what you could do with what we gave you, and we apologize.
We never talked to them.
Yes. Yeah, I had, when I read through the report on Third Mutual, on one of, you repeatedly said repairs need to occur on the carport circuits that are fed from adjacent panels. Can you expand on that? What kind of repairs are you talking about? Are you talking about we need to put new receptacles out there for the people to plug into? Are we talking about running new wiring? I don't know what you're talking about there.
Can either of you address that? Our lead engineer who was on site and wrote the report was not available today, so, sorry.
Yeah, please keep in mind, since this is being videotaped, if you're not speaking into a mic, people watching that will watch this later can't hear anything from the audience if you're not at a microphone. And they missed that, which could be important.
Sorry about that.
So this is Richard Williams with TRC again. I can't speak entirely to the lead engineer's recommendation on the repairs to the adjacent panels. However, I do know that the panels that were not already replaced due to the solar installation, those panels were at capacity. We noticed that there was some some overall wear and tear on those panels and the breakers. There was lots of notes written on the breakers indicating whether to switch it or not switch it, and we noticed some conduit was loose on the bottoms. So I know that those issues could probably easily be addressed by the maintenance staff, but aside from that, I'm not sure on comprehensively what was meant by the additional repairs to the adjacent panels.
And as I mentioned, our lead engineer was not available to participate today, and so we can follow up with you on that, on some and the specific questions that we can't answer right now.
Well, you can do that. I would go to you, Kai. Do we have anybody on staff that can go just walk around and look, even just take the ones that they looked at? But somebody who's walking around looking at these panels and looking at the receptacles in the garages and in the carports? I mean, on staff, can we have staff go out and inspect all these guys? You've got, what, 53 three-story Garden Villa Association buildings, and you've got umpteen different carports, I know, but is there something we can do on staff to go out and, you know, these guys are giving you a little bit of a roadmap because they've looked at these, you know, the ones they looked at, they've identified them here. Is there somebody on staff that can go look at that and see what the problem might be and maybe do a repair on it?
Yes, certainly if there's a report of, let's say it does need maintenance and there's a report, staff is at capacity and it will go on a list just like any other request and staff will get to it. As far as priority, if there's a danger or a safety item, obviously that's going to be the first thing that we address. And that's anywhere throughout the community. If it's just a maintenance issue that needs to be addressed and can be addressed later, then it will be put on our list to address.
Okay, so
but again, we are at capacity. I mean, we have a limited amount of staff and a lot of requests. So
okay.
Yes, we can address these things through staff.
Okay.
Or if the item needs to be taken care of or addressed immediately, we can go with outside services and have them take care of these issues as well.
Okay, well, they've given you a roadmap, they've given you building numbers and places. So are these going to go on your list?
Yes, they will go on our list and they will be addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I don't know, who went out with you and staff. When I was involved in the transition to LED lighting in the community, this is a third. At that time, I chaired the M&C. I was involved with the energy. I learned a very hard lesson. The lesson was there's nothing standard in this community. I don't know if you're aware of the different model garden villa buildings, because I noticed you referenced the 6 meters on the outside walls, okay? There are buildings that only have 5, okay? And there's a lot of other variations that do exist within this community that you're just not picking up on. And you probably should have been briefed a little bit on some of these variations. Staff certainly is aware of it and should have told you. If we were in contact with you, I would have told you for sure that you got to be careful when you're going to go out and look at things around here. Don't expect if you looked at one and said, oh, the others are like it. Ain't no way. Okay? So for that, I'm sorry that you were not aware of this. But it does hurt what you're giving us here because then it's not really addressing everything.
I thought it was a great report. However, as I mentioned when we first started the meeting, that this morning we had Meet the Candidates. And question number 9, the question posed to all 8 candidates was, do you see any waste on any of the boards? Not one of the 8 people either could answer that question, and the 3 sitting directors refused to answer that question. So I think if they had come to this meeting first, they might have had some answers. Thank you.
Catherine?
Yeah, the only question that I have looking at the report is I've looked at those motor control centers in the 3-story buildings. Over the years, they've painted over the nameplate. We need to know what the fault rating is of each of those panels. We need to make sure that whatever Southern California Edison is going to do, if they start raising the voltage level, they start putting in bigger transformers. If that fault level goes up, then every one of those motor control centers will have to be replaced. Because when they're built, they're designed for maybe 60,000 amps, 100,000 amps, 200,000 amps, and that's the bracing in the back of the bus bars. And if you don't have that right, that panel could blow up and you have a serious problem. So we need to really understand the fault levels that we're expecting in the various locations within this community, as SCE is trying to increase the amount of power they can deliver us. Because in doing that, it may increase the fault levels that are available to our equipment, and we really have to take a look at how do we protect ourselves and what do we do with maybe fault limiting solutions, which the engineering people would have to work with SCE. And I looked through the report, I could find no reference to the fault levels that we would expect throughout the community. And back in the 60s, typically, and I noticed a lot of transformers are 240 volt outlet, single phase instead of 3-phase, 480. And so there's such a mixture here. It's going to be really, you're going to have to really think through this with SCE and the consultants very carefully as you move forward. Thank you.
Was that something that was in your purview to do, to check out those particular things?
Probably not. They're going to have to look at the drawing.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying right now, okay? I know you looked at a lot of things. Part of task one, you were looking at our infrastructure as it is today, okay, and how it possibly needs to be modified in the future, okay? But if that's turns out to be a major issue, okay, then it's something that we really need to know, obviously. But we won't know that unless you actually go inspect every one, because as was indicated here, not all the units are exactly the same, so. Yes?
Thank you for the very interesting meeting. Patiently sitting back there and listening to all the discussion, I felt that by looking at the trees, we are lost in the forest. We haven't built any new building or a new unit in this community after the last one was built many years ago. The load, the electrical load, have been working for those units. All of the equipment that we have, those units that use energy, they're becoming more energy efficient, and we're using less energy than compared to the past because they're becoming more efficient. The issue that we were facing is the EV issue, that people buying new cars, they want to plug it into their carport or into their garages. Do we have enough load that we can accommodate them? And also, do we have enough juice coming from the southern Edison to our community? Is our infrastructure there, which means transformer and all of that, can handle those kind of load that coming in, or is it sufficient? Now we are discussing, what we're using in the unit versus the issue that we're facing with the infrastructure of can we handle EVs? How many of those we can handle, where we handle? People are buying them. They are not waiting for us to make a decision for them. They will buy EV cars. By 2040, California will be totally electric car, or that's the designated time frame. We have 20 years to think about this, but that's too late for the 20 years. We're going to grow with that. Right now, their focus should be on that, not, as I said, the load that we were using with existing equipment, we were good. The wiring and all of that, that's operation maintenance. Or VMS will take care of the operation and maintenance. We should be looking at these panels every time, making sure they're not corroded, making sure that they're working condition. That's our job. That's the VMS job. We don't need, keep looking at the panel. Oh, okay, this is corroded. We have to bring somebody to tell us it's corroded. We had 3 reports now that tell us, okay, you have a corrosion. But yet, it's not safety issue. But we haven't addressed the actual issue, that the load that's going to be required by the residents as we go forward, how we're going to handle that. None of these reports, none of these discussion dealt with the issue. That's what I'm saying. I guess we are looking at the trees and we are lost in the forest. At some time, we need to step back and look at the forest rather than the trees.
Thank you. You have task 2 scope review. Be aware of the fact, as we've discussed, the task 2 scope review may get modified.
Yes, understood. And so I'll just share with you what we had planned, and we can go from there. So I'm not going to spend too much time on Golden Rain. We already conducted most of the task 2, and we're advised to hold off on the finalization of a report there. We presented on the microgrid back in July. United and Third, I'm going to be combining them here. I understand they are unique entities, but the scope of work was identical. And so here's just a slide outlining our approach. And so we completed task 1. We understand the infrastructure's current state. And so moving into task 2, our approach would be to analyze the additional load requirements based on projections. And so that would be looking at the EV data, leveraging California projections for growth, and then discussing with staff and whoever else what we can agree on in terms of the projections. And we had actually already discussed with VMS that we could look at a high and low scenario in terms of growth for EVs. And then we would develop a strategy and financial analysis, culminating in a report, a roadmap for electrical infrastructure upgrades and EV charging installations. And so in the next slides, I'm going to share, what the contents of this report, a deliverable, would entail, just to give you a sense of what that's going to look like. I'm not going to spend much time on this. This slide here, it's some language from the approved scope of work, which will, it sounds like, potentially be changing. And so in terms of the final deliverable that we would be looking towards, the table of contents is here on the right-hand side, going through a review of the current infrastructure, findings and analyses, and recommendations and next steps. And so the next slides, I'm kind of diving a little deeper into the subsections of the high-level report. And then on the right-hand side of these next few slides is a table of the scope of work tasks. And so, if you reference the scope of work, there's certain high-level bullets, and we're just showing you how we're addressing the scope of work items embedded in this report here. And so in the review of the current infrastructure, we would provide an overview of the current EV charging infrastructure, golf carts and electric vehicles, provide an overview of the community EV adoptions. And then moving into the findings, we'd provide EV adoption forecasts, as I mentioned, a high and low scenario. Initially we're thinking a 15 to 25% growth across the next 5 to 10 years. And then looking at the impact from EVs and chargers on the community energy consumption, what those infrastructure implications are, and then the current available electrical load per site. And that would be through information provided by SCE, which I mentioned earlier, we kind of already have been coordinating with them on. I know it's a little hard to see in the lower right-hand corner, but this is just a snapshot based on the data we do have for EV chargers. This was a first blush at the growth of the EVs. Moving into the last section of the proposed report would be the recommendations and next steps. Giving another look at the recommendations for the infrastructure upgrades, leveraging, of course, what we've learned through the initial assessment. And then recommendations for EV charging infrastructure. There are other options out there besides, trenching and wiring up each individual carport. My company's we've partnered with a clean tech incubator in Los Angeles, and we're learning about some mobile charging stations, and so there are other options that we can look into.
How about Tesla?
How about Tesla? Well,
Get it in the air.
hey, maybe in 2030, who knows? And then, we'd summarize available grants, rebates, incentives. I know Chris has already done a lot of work looking into these with what's available and applied for some through SCE, so he's got experience with that. And then lastly, coming up with recommendation implementation strategy for the next 5 and 10 years based on the community's electric vehicle needs. And so very high level and of course subject to change based on ongoing conversations, but I think that kind of gives you an idea of what we were planning to look at and deliver in terms of the task 2.
Rebecca Ners, I can tell we don't have this report. Is that correct?
Right. This is not yet.
This has not been done.
Not yet started. It's mildly. We
No,
started.
I'm talking about these slides.
You don't have these slides.
Yeah, we don't have these slides.
Oh, okay. Did you send the slides out, Chris?
No, we sent out the presentation to the board because they were going to be.
Okay. Well, we can send these slides to you after.
Please.
Yeah, it's a PowerPoint, yeah.
And
Yeah,
Guy,
of course.
And Guy will make copies for us.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing right now is the fact that the task 2 is based on task 1 information, some of it. And as one said, garbage in equals
Right.
garbage out.
Yes.
And was pointed out by Steve that maybe some of the data that you have, and also by Sue, may not be
Yes.
totally up to date or totally.
Understood.
So as a
Understood.
result of that, I think we need to recap
Yes.
the information that you have to make sure that we're all on the same page and we agree with what you have is actually what is actually here. And then based on that, we can do something with task 2, okay? Because at this particular point in time, I'm not very confident that you have all of the information that you have and if it's all correct.
Got it.
So you're saying these slides shouldn't be promulgated because task 1 isn't complete?
No. I'm saying for their task 2, in the task 2, when they do that job, okay, for task 2, they need to recap on task 1 data that they currently have that they're going to bring into task 2.
Got it.
Yes,
I would just like to add one more consideration. Within the past few weeks, we now are well aware of the fact that the power companies can, on windy days or hot days, cut off the power of the community. And it may be for a matter of hours, it may be for a matter of days. This is a critical thing for this community where we have aged people that are connected to devices that demand electricity for survival or for comfort or whatever it be. And it seems to me that we have got to add that consideration into whatever you're going to look at it that says, what is it that we could be doing in this community to sustain power or to provide alternative energy to people that need it? I think it's just an absolute consideration that has to be added to the study.
Yeah, and that was actually included in the Golden Rain Foundation Task 2 that we presented on in July, the microgrid. The microgrid, in concept can be in, the community can have this island of energy, but... I'm sorry?
This building in Clubhouse 7, we're going to island, right?
My concern, though, there are people that cannot basically move and get to this island, so to speak. And so that's something that really needs to be addressed by the housing mutuals. What type of thing are they thinking about to provide energy for those people? Or, I just don't know. It hasn't been discussed, but it's something that really has got to be added because I think it's going to become a very critical thing.
We were advised the last time that was brought up to call Southern California Edison, and they have an option for you. Well, I called, and the option was, yes, if you're disabled and you have a life-saving device, like my son has something, we are telling people they are pretty much on their own, and it's up to you to have a generator or miniature solar device, and that's what they're telling their residents.
Are we allowing our
Yeah.
residents to store cans of gasoline in their unit? Is that what you're telling me?
No, I'm telling you, that's what
In other words,
SCE
I'm
is telling
saying to
residents.
tell them to go get a generator may,
Yeah, or
may not
put
be
solar,
a wise
they're telling
solution.
people, you have to plan for that yourself, is what their answer was, yeah.
So if I may, Mr.
stationary
Chair, the scope of work that was provided was, to the consultants, was approved by the task force and the M&C. My understanding is, the impression is that the information that was provided for this assessment, they did follow the scope of work that was provided. The information that staff had provided, there's some question whether that's accurate or if it's enough information, and we get that message and we understand. I don't know that the scope for task 2 necessarily needs to be changed, but by all means, I would appreciate, and I think all of staff would appreciate, the feedback from the task force. If there's things that you feel that are in this task 2 are deficient, then you can shore that up with whatever language or new tasks that you would like to provide for this next phase. I think that's prudent and definitely a wise move. We will look at the information that we have, that we adopted as your staff from the previous, administration. We will take a look at, the way that information is being collected. As far as the proactive maintenance, we do what we can with, reacting to calls that we receive from resident services. And that's how this is set up. There are proactive programs that the board is elected to provide staff direction, and we've taken that direction, and we do have proactive programs. So, my recommendation would be take a look at, and we'll provide the task 2 steps, take a look at that, and then you can give your recommendation. I do know that any direction will be coming from the M&C after we provide this information to them. So if there's more, then please let us know.
Well, and there's some other people who have questions. My thought was to have a working meeting with these people, okay, to at least have a one-on-one discussion with them to see where they think they're going, where we can provide them information, okay, as an onset. Start that out, okay? I mean, the thing right now, getting the M&C committee and this, that, and the other thing, okay? I mean, we're looking for information right now, okay? We're not directing them to do anything. We're going to give them the information based on what they think they have and what we know is possibly wrong or correct or what have you. We need to establish that baseline at this particular point in time, and that's what we need to do.
So a part of our recommendation at the M&C could be that we set up a meeting with the task force and the consultant. We can, depending on the time and how many resources the consultant uses during the meeting that you want to have with them, we could put together a proposal for that. But it would be coming from the M&C, their direction, and if they want to spend the money to move forward with that direction comes from the M&C.
Okay, I'm confused now because the thing right now is we're getting a feedback from these people and we're saying that they're going to go to phase 2 or task 2, and we're going to go with task 2 because of the fact that based on the information they have in hand. And we're saying that we think that the information that they have in hand is not correct. So as part of their task 2, we're going to kick them off. It's a kickoff meeting, call it. And that's part of that task 2. We're not spending any more money or any less money. We're going to be kicking this thing off is what we're doing. So I don't think we need to get M&Cs and what have you available because the people in this dais right now are the people that have the information that we can share with these people. This is a kickoff meeting, like any other kickoff meeting.
Okay, but direction to move to task 2, I believe, needs to come from the M&C.
M&C has given the funds to this task force, $150,000, depending on which, 50,000 from each unit, to do this job. They've given it to this task force. This task force needs to direct it. And that's the way it was presented. Also, in any meeting that you have with the consultant, we need to be, people on this task force need to be allowed to be there. That is the one thing that we've come out from this meeting saying, is that these people here have information that we need to be able to give to the consultant. And you need to make sure that we're there and that we are aware of when the meetings are going to occur, because the value right now is low due to the fact that we didn't get to interact.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
that's
That's
where
where it
we're
is. Yes, John?
Guy, you need to listen to this comment. In furtherance of what we're going to ask you to do, your staff report is dated July 17th, 2018, which is Southern California Edison Emergency Outage Communication Procedures. This needs to be updated.
What page is that? No, it's a different memo.
It's titled Southern California Edison Emergency Outage Communication Procedure. It's an 8-page report.
Who's that from? I don't have that with me, so I don't know what.
Staff
you're looking
report.
at. Who wrote the staff report?
It was submitted by you guys to us, dated July what date was that, John, again?
Prepared by Siobhan and reviewed by Chuck Holland, Tim Moy, and Eileen Powell.
That's not MNC related. That's not us.
It's a communications department memo.
Yeah, that's not an M&C item.
Well, certainly, based on the comments we just heard, and we all know, it's certainly current. So should I need to make a motion? We ask Siobhan?
We need to talk to
I don't-
Eileen.
I need to
Eileen's
talk
ready
to
to take
Eileen,
care of
okay?
that.
So this particular point in time, that's an Eileen.
So who's going to talk to Eileen?
I nominate you.
Okay, I will.
Go ahead. I think that's a great idea, John. Yes, Bill?
Yes, I noticed through this report that you're talking about a 5 to 10 year plan, and I think it cuts back to the data, because we're going to have to prioritize the work that we want in our respective organizations. And so I think when we start looking at this, we're going to have to view it in terms of when people are looking at $1.5 million to $2 million to spend. The first thing I think that when I first saw that, and then I realized you're talking about a 5 to 10 year plan, that these monies can be allocated so over a period of time, that it's not a one-time upfront hit. But I think it also, with the right data, we can better target what needs to be accomplished first, second, third, fourth in your task 2 plan.
So the recommendations in the reports that we went over are short-term recommendations rather than the 5 and 10 year plan. But for the EV charging upgrades that would be required, yes, they could be phased.
Right, I mean, if we've got immediate problems, we're going to need to know what those are. You know, you've showed us a sample of them, but so we can address those up front. But if we're going to come together with a long-term plan on how we're going to address the electric infrastructure in these different entities, then I think it would behoove us to see where we're growing. And so as we go over this over the years, we can adapt. We can say, 3 years from now, priority 3 may not be priority 3 anymore. It may have moved up to priority 1. Mm-hmm. But we need to look at your points, discuss them, see if this is what the issues are that we want addressed, and then have data to back it up to see where we want to put our energies. So
I think that's a valid point, Bill. I really do.
I do want to get a copy of this thing, though. I do want to get a copy of this thing right away.
Yeah, they're going to give us the
Slides.
PowerPoint presentation. They'll send it out. Is that correct? And probably in PDF format for some of the people. I've got PowerPoint, but some people don't, so if we
We
can
have
have it.
PDF,
Yeah, so PDF.
We'll-
Yes, Sue?
We'll need the PowerPoint file, presentation, whatever form it's in, to slip the slides into the video.
Oh, okay. Well, then if
Yeah,
you
I
can
just sent them to
send
Chris
both,
right before the
okay, that's
meeting.
fine. Okay,
Yeah.
as far as you can do that. I mean, it's not a big deal, obviously. It's just some electrons. Anything else that we have?
I just want to remind Lori, can you make sure I get on the list for the mailing, because I'm sitting in for Dick today, but he may not be on this in the future. So I'd like, okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Anything else?
we go to final comment?
Yeah, I mean, I just listed a couple next steps, and if there's any outstanding questions that we weren't unable to address regarding the infrastructure assessments or things that come up later, perhaps coordinate with VMS to collect those and have them sent our way. There was a typo that on, I think it was thirds, and I sent a revised version to Chris this morning, and so we can address those questions and any urgent revisions. And then, the other next step was to confirm the scope and budget for task 2. It sounds like additional discussions need to happen, and based on what we've learned and additional information that could be coming our way, we will need to revisit that scope on our end as well.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, okay, before you tackle some of the task 2 items, okay, we really need to have this quote-unquote kickoff meeting, okay, with the people here, okay? I mean, otherwise you're going to be spending our money in an area that we feel maybe is not really
Of course.
appropriate to be spent, okay?
Understood.
Because of the fact that you don't have all the information that you need. So, and if anybody has any questions that you have the comments and the questions, okay, and the responses, okay, anybody disagree or have any sort of comments or what have you with regard to that, send them along to myself for the moment, and or to Steve, and then we'll forward it on to you, and if there's any follow-up that needs to be done for some of these comments. Yes?
Is it final comment?
Sure.
The final, what do you mean final comment? These are the comments that,
No, go on with the agenda.
oh, no, we will, I will go around and ask everybody if they have a final comment, okay? But I just want to thank Rebecca here, okay, for all of her work and what have you, and her team. And we will, apologize again for some of the things that happened at the beginning of the meeting. And so does, you have anything else more that you have to bring?
I just want to thank you all for your time. I think EVs are very exciting, a little more glamorous than, talking about circuits and panels, but it all folds in to the, what's needed to continue growing towards a more clean energy community.
Right, okay. So I'll go around the table right now. Sue, you have anything else?
No, other than thank you for stepping in.
Oh, you're welcome.
I would say ditto. Thank you for stepping in. And thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Carl, I think you did a really admirable job. Absolutely.
Admirable.
And, well, outstanding. Staff, you took a little bit of a hit. Hopefully, things will work out, and look forward to working closer.
Yes.
Yes, everything that Bert said, I think you did an outstanding job too, and of course, I always love Guy over there, so thank you.
Thank you. Kush?
Thank you, Carl. Thank you for doing what you did. Thank you to the young lady and your team for doing this presentation, and apologies for all the discord that we had. So hopefully in the future we will have a smooth running meeting. And like Bert said, team, you have to participate a little closer. Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Carl, for stepping up to the plate, and I think that you need to meet with Siobhan to find out who's going to chair the meeting next time.
Hopefully not me. Sue?
I really want to say we respect your report and we understand the situation, and please don't feel like you didn't do the job that we asked you to do. We need to get better data to you, and thank you so much for putting up with this.
It's great that you guys are all so engaged.
And I want to thank you again. And with that, unless you have anything else, Guy, Laurie?
No, but I would like to thank Rebecca and all the work that her team has put into this report, and for coming today and standing before the firing squad, and, you know, you did a great job. Thank you. Thank you for your help.
Okay. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, you did a terrific job.
Okay, the 150,000, what boards contributed?